The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to explore and explain key features of texts and how they contribute to meaning. Learners should be able to identify and explain the purpose, structure, and language use in texts. Learners should be able to recognize the writer's and/or the character's viewpoint and give supporting evidence from the texts.
Hi, I'm Megan. Thanks for joining me as we continue to evaluate and compare texts. In the first part of this lesson, we looked at 3 texts that all had to do with converting your driver's license from your ID book to the new credit card format. We looked at an amusing column, a Editorial cartoon, and a news article. In this part of the lesson, we're going to examine an editorial on the same topic. This editorial is called Gimme, 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 and it appeared in the Sunday Times newspaper. Now think about it for a minute. It's an editorial, so what predictions can you make? In an editorial, the writer normally gives his or her opinions about some event that's happened in the news. So it's likely to contain a mixture of facts and opinions. What tone do you think the writer would have used? Do you think it'll be as light-hearted and fun as articles we looked at in the first part of the lesson? Think about it, and as we read the first paragraph, see if your predictions are correct. The title reads, Gimme, 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 and the editorial begins, "There's nothing like a good long queue in the baking sun to stir up emotions. Take this week, for example, when thousands had to queue for hours to get their driver's licenses converted from the identity document format to the new card system." Let's think about this editor's choice of a heading. The words gimme, gimme, gimme are informal diction. They're the kind of words that a screaming toddler might use when he or she wants something. Why do you think the editor's chosen these words as the title? Perhaps he's trying to make the point that the public is screaming for more time to convert their licenses, when in actual fact they've had more than adequate time and simply have not used it until the last minute. Let's look at that first paragraph again. The second sentence of this paragraph is factual and unemotional. In it, the editor states that thousands had to queue for hours. This is a fact, it can be proven. He also gives the reason for the queuing. People were waiting to get their driver's licenses converted. However, if you read the first sentence of the paragraph, you will get a clue as to what the rest of the editorial is going to be about. In the sentence, the editor states that the process was stirring up emotions, and it is these emotions that are going to be discussed in the balance of this editorial. In the first part of this lesson, we looked at a cartoon by Sapiro and an article by Lynn Sampson that took a humorous or light-hearted view of the situation. From this opening paragraph, we have realized that the editor is going to examine this issue more seriously. His article is also more likely to contain a balance of facts and opinions. Let's revise what these two terms mean. A fact is a thing that is known to be true, whereas an opinion is a belief based on grounds short of proof. Let's look at the next paragraph of this editorial and see what facts and opinions have been included. By Friday, there was outrage and mayhem. Some people were threatening to storm buildings because they dared to close their doors at midnight. Look at the diction that's been used here. We are going to pay close attention to these words: outrage, mayhem, threatening, storm, and dared. The words that were used in this article all imply extreme action. You'll find verbs like these often used in war reporting. Let's focus on 2 words that were used. Outrage means an extreme or shocking violation of others' rights. Mayhem means a violation or damaging action. These 2 words, outrage and mayhem, could be applied to the Zapiro cartoon that we saw earlier. However, Lynn Sampson's account of the card license queues does not imply outrage or mayhem at all. She makes out as if the event was a social occasion. Let's read the second paragraph of this editorial to see how it continues. Others were seeking court action to invalidate the switchover to the new licenses. Most of the 76% of drivers who made the change during the last 5 years were enjoying a quiet moment of gloating at the expense of the queuing hordes. This paragraph combines both facts and opinions. As we look at it again, see if you can spot which is which. Remember, a fact is something that can be proven. This first sentence is a fact. You could prove that there were people seeking court action to invalidate the switchover process. In the second sentence, there is a fact and an opinion. Can you spot which is which? 76% of drivers had made the change during the last 5 years. That's a fact. It's something that you could prove by looking at the records at the licensing department. There's also an opinion. Let's have a look. Can the editor prove that people were enjoying a quiet moment of gloating at the expense of the queuing hordes? I doubt it. In fact, I don't think that people would delight in the misery of others who have to wait in the queue, although they don't have to. Let's look at the next paragraph and see if there are more opinions. Instead of hanging their heads in shame at their failure to use the 5 years, extended to 5.5 when the deadline was moved to accommodate the tardy, to undertake this simple, harmless, and inexpensive procedure, many of those in the queues had taken up political activism. In this paragraph, the tone, style, and diction are changing. Notice that the editor is now giving more opinions than he did in the earlier paragraph. Let's look at the diction that he's used. He's used this expression, hanging their heads in shame. This is something that guilty people do. He also talks about their failure. It's their fault that they missed the deadline. And he also mentions that they are tardy. It's their fault that they are late. What do these words remind you of? To me, these are the sorts of words that parents would use when disciplining a naughty child. Although the editor's tone is still formal, this editorial has taken on a lecture-like quality. Let's look at some of the other diction that he has used. He describes the process of getting a new driver's license as being simple, harmless, and inexpensive. Are these words facts? Let's think about it. The words simple, harmless, and inexpensive are not neutral in this editorial. The process might have been simple, harmless, and inexpensive for the writer of this article, but that does not mean that the process was that simple for everyone. Also, what might have seemed like a small amount of money for this writer might have been a large amount of money for other people. The writer's attitude comes through quite strongly. He is unsympathetic of people who have not converted their licenses. He believes they had adequate time and that the process was simple, and if they haven't had their license converted, it is entirely their own fault. Let's look at his next choice of interesting diction. Here he says that people have turned to political activism as a means of protesting against the new procedure. When you think about it, the people protesting have a valid point too. They'd paid the first time to do their driver's license test. Why should they pay again to get a new card? The editor doesn't agree with them, however, and that's why he's making them out to be almost like terrorists, or simply going against the conventions of society that everyone else, in his belief, is happy to adhere to. In the first part of this lesson, we devised a table to compare the three texts that we looked at. In our table, we compared the following features. We looked at intention, attitude, tone, and register. Now let's see how these features apply to the editorial that we've just examined. Let's fill in the details of the editorial we looked at. The intention of the editorial is to comment on an event that has happened. What is the editor's attitude? He is critical of people who have not converted their license. The tone that he has used is incisive. He is not afraid to make his feelings quite clear. The register that he has used is formal. This is not meant to be light-hearted and fun. Obviously, there were other adjectives that could have been used to describe the tone and attitude of this editorial. The ones I chose conveyed the feeling that the editor was critical about people who had not converted their licenses in time. In this lesson and the extension, we looked at a number of texts focusing on the issue of converting your driver's license. It's highly unlikely that you would ever get texts on this particular topic in a test or exam. However, I hope you have learned the skills of analyzing the purpose, attitude, and style that have been used in texts. If you know how to do this, you will be able to evaluate and compare any texts that you are faced with. Please join me in the next lesson. Goodbye.